We're inside my shop where the pouring into all these molds are going to take place. Now, the reason that I had to mix 80 pounds of concrete is because of my experimental tree of life here. I've made this mold out of latex and a master that somebody donated, and I used it, and now I can reproduce it. And so because of that, I wanted to make sure I used all my concrete, so I got all of these molds prepared. They've all been lubricated with my vegetable oil in the brush, and I think I've already told you about that and how I do it. And another little trick I'm going to show you before we get started is the hangers. You're going to need hangers, and that's so that they go here and you can embed these in the concrete, and then you can hang your item on the wall when it hardens up. Now, you can buy them, but I use pieces of aluminum wire that come out of big old cables. You can use scrap electrical wire, like this, and you can even use a coat hanger if you want to. And what I do is really, really simple. Is I take me a piece of this, I just leave the coating on it on the 12-2, cut you a piece of the appropriate length. You may have to mess with this to determine what you want to do. I bend it right in the middle, like that. Then I bend them out, just like that, together. And then I bend them kind of up, so that when I put them in here, they'll embed down and they'll kind of stick up, okay? Go ahead and make those ahead of time and have them ready to go. All right, we are going to start by pouring into my tree of life here. I'm not going to go through the whole process. I'll just show you a little bit of how I do it, and then we'll go on over and I'll pour the molds that you're really interested in. So let's see if we can do this, keep it in camera. All right, I'm gonna kind of get me up a big scoop of this stuff, and I start just anywhere and kind of put it like that. It's hard to use this camera and keep it centered. Now I start off by putting in this mold. I have to do this because it's so weak right across here. It will crack every time. So I take and I put my concrete in. If you paddle it or pat it like this, it will kind of liquefy it, okay? Turn it back really soupy, and that's called pumping. And same thing that happens if you take a bulldozer and you put it on wet property and it's going back and forth just fine, and then all of a sudden the ground starts to soup up and old bulldozer will go out of sight. Ask your bulldozer friends about that, they'll tell you. I have cut little pieces of wire to go in here to reinforce it. I put them in it first, right like this. Just like that. Try not to touch anything. We'll get a little bit more concrete, and then we'll go on to the next part, and I won't bore you with all this. Pat it again. You want to keep it down below the level of this. I'm sorry if I get out of camera here. I'm more in a hurry for you guys, so this video won't be so long that I am work time, because you have plenty of work time. All right, now I embedded those pieces of chicken wire in there, and it just come off a grill like this. It's really good reinforcing material. So I've got that in there, and then I'll come back and I'll put a little bit more on top, and I'll pat them down. And that embeds all that metal there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish filling this mold. Get back, I'll show you the completed process, and then we'll move on over to those two-dimensional molds, the plastic ones. Okay, I've got my tree of life poured and got all the bubbles settled out of it, and my little picture hanger over here ready to go. So we're not going to fool with that one anymore. I'll show you what it looks like uncast. I have remixed my concrete with my hoe, got it back to where I think it's good to go. Now we're going to deal with all these right here, or as far as the concrete will go. As I've said before, and I know this is kind of redundant, but you can't mention it too much. Always make sure you've got enough moles for the amount of concrete that you mix up. It really, really helps. Also, you need level, whatever you're pouring, make sure it's level. And after that, it's as simple as getting some concrete out, popping it in a mold, like that. I start off with just a little bit, and I shake it. It does a couple of different things. Number one, it settles it into the lowest recesses of your mold, and it starts the process of getting the bubbles out. Bubbles are not your friend, and so you need to get those bubbles out. It'll take a lot of this bouncing back and forth like I do, like that, to do a super job, but it will. You'll see the bubbles rise to the top. After you've got a little bit in there, put a little bit more on top. This will keep a lot of the bubbles out, because as you shake it, the concrete's going to move towards the edges. Just like that. See it moving towards the edge. Now I don't fill it completely up. I leave about 1/8 of an inch around the edge here, so that whenever I go to unmold it, it unmolds a little better. Most of these molds from Go Statue are deep enough for you to do that. So, that's just a trick. So bump it a little bit. You might come back to it a little later, bump it again after you get them all poured, give everything time to rise. And on a deep mold like this, or one of these big ones, just one more quick trick. I'm not going to make you suffer through watching me do all of these molds, but whenever I have a nose or something like that really deep, I'll do it this way. I'll start around the edges, and I bump it and let the stuff flow just like that into the nose. Because if you don't, sometimes you get little zits on them, little air bubbles, things like that. You see how that's flowing? Okay. Put you another dollop of cement. You can also see how this is turning green. I mean, it turned green with water in it. Almost there. Just a little bit more in this one, and that'll be fine. Okay. That's got those two poured right there. I will pour the rest of these off camera. It's all the same process. I'll bump them good, then I'll put the little hangers in them, and I'll be back with you. Okay, we've got all of these poured, and we've got all of our little hangers except for one, and I'll show you how that's done so you'll kind of see. It's not a real big deal. You just take your hanger. You remember that hole I told you to drill? Well, this one's easy to tell where the top is. This one not so easy. So the hole kind of tells you where you're going to put your hanger. It also works as a really nifty way to hang your stuff up. I just put the hanger there and I wiggle it around a little bit, and boom, that's it. Just as soon as it goes out of sight, it's good to go. Now, some water is going to rise to the top. Don't worry about it. Let these things sit here for at least 24 hours. They'll harden up, and then they'll pop out, and we'll show you that. But that's all there is to it. Now, all that is left is a very important thing, and that is take all your stuff outside and clean it up. because this stuff hardens on your rake or in your wheelbarrow, it's going to be messy. So go outside, clean it up, and that's all there is to pouring this in these molds. And next we're going to unmold these things. Okay, you've purchased your molds, and you've drilled your swell little hole here, and you've put your separator on it, whatever kind of material you want to use, and you've mixed up your concrete, whatever additives you wanted, poured it in your mold, and let it sit at least 24 hours. And after they have set, and you're reasonably sure that they're hard, it's time to unmold it. So we're going to unmold this bad boy right here. He's one of my favorites. Hope he didn't come out of the mold before I get where I want to get. So that's what we're going to do. And normally, if you've done everything correctly, they'll come right out of the mold. This one's susceptible to breaking here sometimes down on this part. So I'm rather careful with him, and I just, I bump it along a little bit like this. And the bumping thing is the trick. Just bump, bump, bump. And it comes right out, just like that. Almost knock something over. And there you have it. You have a really, really nice mold. There's no air bubbles. It's nice and smooth. And that's almost it. Now, the only thing that I'm fixing to show you now is something that you may or may not have to do. And that is, if you use possum hair, the fiberglass stuff, there's going to be, a lot of times, there's not much on this one, but there's going to be little fiberglass pieces along the edge. Sometimes you can get them off with just a rubbing stone, but in case you can't, here's what you got to do. Now, this is one example. It's not necessarily your cheapest example. Benzomatic makes one that doesn't have an automatic starter on it, but you can just get something like this that'll screw onto one of these bottles. And I recommend the $13 or $14 Benzomatic one off of Amazon, because this thing doesn't most of the time it won't crank. I mean, you click it and it doesn't fire up, okay? So let me show you what you do with this, and you can get whatever kind you want. Okay, once you have your torch lit and your flame, if you'll just go around the edges, you'll see the stuff burning off. It'll make a little flame, and you'll just go around it very quickly. You don't have to get anything hot. That fiberglass will burn right off, and then you are good to go. It is that simple. Be careful when you're using this. It is hot, but once that's done, all of your fiberglass is off. Okay, cut it off and take it off of the tank so it won't leak, and you have got a casting. And the only thing that I have left to do to this casting is coat it with a concrete sealer. After it's dried for a few days, you can put your hands on it and you can feel it. If it's cool, it's still drying. So once it's room temperature, so it'll absorb, I put a coat of concrete sealer, and maybe we'll get a chance to go through that on this video. We'll just see where it goes. But okay, folks, that is the unmolding and getting the possum hair off if you used it. And you're ready to clean this bad boy again and get it ready to mold again. So there you go. Y'all just kind of hang in there, and we'll do the last part of this. Alright, the last thing we're going to do in this video is put a little concrete sealer on the Green Man casting that we made the other day. And the product that I use is this right here. It's by no means the only product. It just happens to be what I pick up when I'm at one of the big box stores. It goes a long way. There are other sealers you might want to get on YouTube and just see which one that you prefer or that's available wherever you are located. It's not necessary. I do put it on here because it keeps the moisture out, and I'm sure increases the longevity of the casting. And in some of the secondary colors that I put on these, it does help. So with that said, I use one of my little brushes from Harbor Freight that I'm always mentioning. I put some in a little container like this, and I just start adding it on it. Now I have this casting set on a couple of blocks of granite here to get it up off the ground. 2x4s were preferable, but it was so hot outside I could not find any. So I grabbed those little pieces of stone, and they get it up off of the work surface, and they also protect it from the hanger on the back, so there's no undue stress on the piece. If you want this, now this stuff is shiny. It says high gloss, and it does gloss it up. You just kind of liberally put it on here and let it soak in. And it doesn't take long to do it. And if you want to put a second coat, you can. I don't really think that it needs it, but that's personal preference, and what you would need to do is try it yourself on a piece. See if you want 1 coat or 2 coats or 3 coats or no coats. Who knows? But this is just the last step that I take in with my castings, and it seals them up quite well. Now I slopped that on there pretty liberally for the sake of getting this over with. I will continue to go back and forth over it until I get all of the excess. You see there's some excess here. And I just kind of keep sopping it up with the brush. As it dries and soaks in, it will eventually all soak in. And other than a little bit of excess, that's my green man. And it'll dry in a little while, and it will be ready to go. Okay, that's all there is to casting concrete. I'm sorry, and I apologize for the length of this video, and but it was necessary. So I am Captain Mike. This is my video on casting concrete, and I'm out of here.